We're now in the fifth week of the 40 days readings, and this week we focus on the letter to the Hebrews. Hebrews is actually a very easy letter to comment on because it's not surely a letter, it's more like an essay or a speech. It's got a structure to it that you can kind of dip into at any one point, and so our readings this week focus on a ring of Jesus being, first of all, the king, and then being the priest. So I'm going to start with a reading that comes at the beginning of the week. This is from Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. And it reads like this: "He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. He upholds the universe by his word of power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high." Chapter 1 finishes like this: "And to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet'?" We begin with Christ as king, who is seated, and the enemies are seated as if they are below him as a footstool for his feet. At the end, in chapter 10, I'd like us to look at verses 12 and 13. It reads like this: "But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time until his enemies should be made a footstool for his feet." Now note here, it's the same idea. He's sitting down, and he has enemies as a footstool for his feet. What's different here is that he has sacrificed. And in the intermediary chapters that we look at for this week, we learn that Christ is not just king, but he is priest. And the transition takes place in the chapters and the verses that we look at this week. And I want to just go through some of these chapters to give you a kind of an understanding, to kind of help us work our way through to the end of the ring structure. First, Hebrews 1, I've read to you, at least as it applies to Christ seated as king. Chapter 2 focuses on our organic connection to Christ. If Christ is king, if Christ has benefits because he is seated, then we can sort of appropriate these very same things for ourselves. Chapter 3. This is where we find out that life is a struggle. We're like wandering in the wilderness with the children of Israel. And we're struggling to find our rest. We're struggling to find our seat. Chapter 6 is a chapter that I want to focus on a bit more. Here I want to look at chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. "We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Christ has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." Here we learn that Christ is on the other side of the veil. If life looks veiled to us, like we are in front of a veil of a temple, Christ is on the other side. And it's in this passage that we have hope, if he's on the other side, that we can also come to the other side of this curtain. And then finally, we see him in chapter 10, who has offered the sacrifice for us and allows us and is waiting for us to come and join him behind the curtain. For a reflection on the whole of these verses, I would say there's one way that we can think about it. We can think about it in terms of discouragement. Are we discouraged? Am I discouraged as I go through this season? Am I discouraged with life? Am I losing vision for what I'm living for or what true reality is? And then if it's true that Christ is a priest and he invites me to be seated as a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, then he invites me into his intercession. It's not just looking for vision for myself, but it's looking for vision for those who are connected to me, who I have responsibility for, people who are dependent on me. And not just people now that are connected to me, and not just for myself, but now the order of Melchizedek, the priesthood of Christ, now allows me to intercede for the whole world, to see the priorities that Christ has as he looks at the world. So with those kinds of reflections, those are the things that we can talk about, that we can think about out of the letter to the Hebrews.